Why time feels faster as you get older. When you were 7, summer felt infinite. Now, an entire year disappears in what feels like months. So what changed, time or you? When you were a child, waiting for your birthday felt like waiting forever. Now birthdays come so fast they feel uncomfortable. At 10 years old, 1 year was 10% of your entire life. At 40, 1 year is just 2.5%. But that's not the real reason. Hash the brain's time machine. Your brain measures time using novelty. When you're young, everything is new. New school, new friends, new experiences, first everything. New experiences create more memory markers. More markers equals longer perceived time. When you're older, routines increase. Days blend together. Fewer firsts. Your brain compresses familiar experiences. So time doesn't move faster. Your brain records less detail. But there's more to this story than just the mechanics of memory. There's a fundamental shift in how your consciousness processes reality as you age. And understanding this shift might be the key to reclaiming the rich, expansive feeling of time you once had. Hash the architecture of memory. Think about last week. Can you clearly remember Tuesday? Probably not. Now think about your first day of high school. Crystal clear. Why? Emotional intensity stretches perceived time. Routine shrinks it. Your brain isn't a video camera recording everything equally. It's more like a curator in a museum, deciding what's worth preserving and what can be discarded. When you experience something routine, your brain essentially says, "I've seen this before. No need to store the details." It creates a kind of mental shorthand, a compressed file rather than a full recording. This is actually an evolutionary advantage. Your ancestors didn't need to remember every single time they picked berries from the same bush. They needed to remember the dangerous snake they encountered, the new water source they discovered, the stranger who appeared at the edge of camp. Novelty and potential threat demanded attention and memory. Routine could be automated. But in modern life, this same mechanism creates a time perception crisis. When every day follows the same pattern, your brain creates very few detailed memories. Wake up, same breakfast, same commute, same desk, same lunch spot, same evening routine, same shows, same weekend patterns. Your brain compresses all of this into Tuesday or a typical week or summer of 2024. Hash the dopamine connection. Novelty releases dopamine. Dopamine helps encode memory. Less novelty equals weaker memory anchors. That's why a vacation feels long while it's happening but short when you look back. Dopamine is often called the motivation molecule, but it's more accurate to call it the salience molecule. It marks things as important, worth paying attention to, worth remembering. When you encounter something novel, your brain releases dopamine, essentially highlighting that experience in your mental timeline. This is why that week you spent learning to surf in Costa Rica feels like it lasted a month, while the 3 months you spent doing the same job tasks feels like it passed in a week. During the surf trip, your brain was constantly releasing dopamine, marking moments. The first time you stood up on the board, the unexpected marine life you saw, the new people you met, the different food you tried, the unfamiliar language you heard. Each dopamine release created a memory marker, a flag on your mental timeline. But here's something fascinating. The anticipation of novelty also releases dopamine. This is why children experience time so differently. When you're young, you're not just experiencing more novelty, you're also constantly anticipating it. Tomorrow might bring anything. Next week is a mystery. Summer vacation is an ocean of possibility. This anticipation creates its own dopamine cascade, its own set of memory markers, stretching time even further. As adults, we often lose this sense of anticipation. We know what tomorrow will bring because it will bring what today brought. We know what next week will be because it will be like this week. We've narrowed the possibility space of our lives, and in doing so, we've compressed our perception of time. Hash the existential dimension. There's also something deeper. When you're young, life is ahead of you. When you're older, your brain subconsciously compares time to what's left. The horizon feels closer, so time feels faster, not because it is, but because your awareness changes. This is perhaps the most profound aspect of time perception that rarely gets discussed. It's not just about memory and novelty. It's about your relationship with your own mortality. When you're young, time feels abundant because you perceive it as abundant. The future stretches endlessly ahead. You have time to be anything, do anything, become anyone. There's no urgency because there's no scarcity. Death is an abstract concept, something that happens to other people, something impossibly far away. But as you age, your relationship with time fundamentally changes. You start to measure time not just in years lived, but in years potentially remaining. You become aware, often unconsciously, that time is finite. This awareness creates a psychological acceleration effect. The same 12 months feels shorter when you're aware you might have only 30 or 40 12-month periods left versus when you unconsciously assumed you had infinite 12-month periods ahead. This is why people often report that time seemed to slow down during near-death experiences or serious health scares. Suddenly, time becomes precious again. Each moment demands attention because you're acutely aware that moments are limited. The scarcity creates salience. There's also a goal-relatedness aspect to this. When you're young, you're moving toward things. Each year brings you closer to the independence, freedom, and possibilities you dream about. When you're older, especially if you've achieved your major life goals or feel stuck in your current trajectory, you're not moving toward something in the same way. You're maintaining, sustaining, continuing. And maintenance time feels different than building time. Hash the attention economy of your life. Here's something most people don't realize. Your perception of time is directly related to where you place your attention. And in the modern world, we've largely outsourced our attention. Think about how often you're truly present versus how often you're on autopilot. When you're driving the same route you've driven 1,000 times, are you really experiencing those 20 minutes? Or is your mind somewhere else entirely? When you're scrolling through social media, are you experiencing time? Or are you in a kind of temporal suspension, where an hour can pass without a single memorable moment? The rise of smartphones and constant connectivity has created a paradox. We have access to infinite novelty, infinite stimulation, infinite information. Yet many people report feeling like time moves faster than ever. Why? Because the novelty of digital content doesn't create the same kind of rich memory markers as embodied, real-world novelty. When you learn a new physical skill, like playing an instrument or dancing, your brain creates detailed sensory-motor memories. When you travel to a new place, your brain encodes spatial, visual, olfactory, and emotional information in a rich, multi-dimensional memory. When you have a deep conversation with someone, your brain processes facial expressions, tone of voice, emotional resonance, and meaning simultaneously. But when you scroll through TikTok or Instagram, even though you're seeing novel content, your body is stationary, your environment is unchanged, and the content is often consumed in a state of partial attention. Your brain creates very few rich memory markers from this experience. Hours of scrolling might compress into a vague sense of "I was on my phone," with few specific memories of what you actually saw. This is the attention economy of your life. Where you invest your attention determines what memories you create, and what memories you create determines your perception of time. Hash the routine trap. Most adults fall into what I call the routine trap. We build efficient systems for moving through life, and then we wonder why life seems to be moving so fast. Routines are necessary. They reduce decision fatigue, they create stability, they allow us to function in complex modern environments. But routines are also temporal black holes. They consume time without creating the experience of time. Consider a typical weekday. You wake up at the same time, follow the same morning routine, take the same route to work, do largely similar tasks, eat lunch at the same places, come home via the same route, make the same kinds of dinners, watch the same types of shows, and go to bed around the same time. If you do this Monday through Friday, your brain doesn't create 5 separate days of memories. It creates one template of workday and applies it 5 times. Then the weekend comes. Maybe you have weekend routines too. Saturday morning errands, Saturday afternoon activities, Sunday brunch, Sunday evening prep for the week. Again, your brain isn't creating rich, distinct memories. It's running the weekend template. Do this for a month, and your brain hasn't created 30 days of memories. It's created maybe 2 or 3 templates, repeated. Do it for a year, and you haven't created 365 days of lived experience. You've created a handful of templates, iterated. This is why, when you look back on a year, you often struggle to remember what actually happened. The year compressed into its routines and its deviations from routine. The routines disappeared into the background, and only the unusual moments stand out. The vacation you took, the wedding you attended, the project that went wrong, the unexpected news. Hash the granularity of experience. There's another factor that affects time perception that's rarely discussed: the granularity of your experience. This is about how finely you're parsing reality, how much detail you're noticing, how present you are with the texture of each moment. Children naturally experience life with high granularity. Everything is noticed because everything is novel. The way light hits a wall, the texture of a new food, the sound of a word they haven't heard before, the feeling of a new fabric. They're processing reality at high resolution because they don't yet have the templates to compress it. Adults, especially busy adults, tend to experience life at low granularity. We move through our days in chunks: morning, commute, work, evening, sleep. We're processing reality at low resolution because we're trying to optimize for efficiency. We skim the surface of experience rather than diving into its depths. But here's what's interesting. You can consciously adjust the granularity of your experience. You can choose to notice more, to pay attention to detail, to be present with the texture of life. And when you do this, time slows down. This is the mechanism behind mindfulness meditation. When you sit and pay attention to your breath, you're not doing anything novel. Breathing is the most routine activity imaginable, but you're experiencing it at high granularity. You're noticing the sensation of air entering your nostrils, the expansion of your chest, the pause between breaths, the temperature change, the subtle sounds. You're processing a routine experience at high resolution, and this creates a sense of expanded time. The same principle applies to any activity. Eating a meal can be a 5-minute routine, or it can be a rich sensory experience where you notice flavors, textures, temperatures, aromas. A walk can be a way to get from point A to point B, or it can be an opportunity to notice the quality of light, the variety of sounds, the feeling of your body moving through space. When you increase the granularity of your experience, you increase the number of memory markers your brain creates, and you slow down your perception of time. This doesn't require novelty. It requires presence. Hash the memory compression phenomenon. Let's go deeper into how memory compression actually works. Your brain uses a process called memory consolidation, where experiences are transferred from short-term to long-term memory. During this process, your brain essentially decides what's worth keeping and what can be discarded. For routine experiences, your brain uses something called a schema. A schema is a mental framework, a template for understanding and organizing information. You have schemas for all sorts of things: what a typical restaurant visit is like, what a typical work meeting involves, what a typical conversation with your best friend feels like. When you have a new experience that fits an existing schema, your brain stores very little information about that specific instance. Instead, it essentially makes a note: had another typical work meeting. The details are discarded because they match the template. This is efficient for brain function, but it means that individual instance essentially disappears from your accessible memory. Only when something deviates from the schema does your brain store details. The meeting where someone made an unexpected announcement, the restaurant where the service was terrible, the conversation where your friend revealed something surprising. These deviations create distinct memories. This is why many people report that their childhood summers feel like they lasted forever, but last summer feels like it barely happened. During childhood summers, very little matched existing schemas. Every day offered schema violations, novel experiences that demanded detailed encoding. But last summer probably followed familiar patterns. Maybe you took a week-long vacation, and that week stands out. But the other weeks compressed into typical summer weeks and effectively disappeared from your memory timeline. Hash the prospective versus retrospective time paradox. Here's a fascinating paradox. Time perception while something is happening often differs from time perception when looking back on it. When you're engaged in a highly focused activity, time often feels like it passes quickly in the moment. This is the flow state that psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described. When you're fully absorbed in a challenging but achievable task, hours can pass without notice. But when you look back on that period, it often feels substantial. You remember being deeply engaged, you remember what you accomplished, you remember the experience as meaningful. Conversely, when you're bored or waiting, time often feels slow in the moment. Every minute drags. But when you look back on that period, it compresses into nothing. You remember being bored, but the experience left few memory markers, so retrospectively, the time feels like it barely existed. This creates an interesting implication. If you want your life to feel long and full retrospectively, you should seek out engaging, meaningful activities even if they make time pass quickly in the moment. The richness of the experience creates memory density, which creates the perception of time well spent. But if you want to slow down time in the moment, you need to reduce stimulation and increase present moment awareness. This is the time-expanding effect of boredom, of waiting, of meditation, of sitting quietly without distraction. Most modern adults optimize their lives to avoid the feeling of slow time in the moment. We fill every gap with stimulation. Waiting in line, check your phone, commuting, listen to a podcast, free evening, stream something. We've essentially eliminated boredom from our lives, and in doing so, we've eliminated one of the primary mechanisms for slowing down perceived time. There's a balance to be struck. You want enough engagement and meaning to create rich memories retrospectively. But you also want enough spaciousness and presence to avoid the sensation that life is rushing past you in the moment. Hash the temporal landmarks effect. Researchers have identified something called the temporal landmarks effect. Certain events serve as landmarks in your mental timeline, helping you organize and remember periods of your life. These landmarks create boundaries that prevent memory compression. Personal landmarks include birthdays, holidays, major life events like graduations or weddings, moving to a new place, starting a new job. Cultural landmarks include historical events, natural disasters, collective experiences like the pandemic. When your life is rich with temporal landmarks, your memory timeline has clear structure. You can remember before I moved to Denver, and after I moved to Denver as distinct periods. The landmark creates a boundary that prevents those periods from blurring together. When your life has few temporal landmarks, your memory timeline becomes undifferentiated. Years blur together because there are no clear boundaries separating them. This is why people often report that their 20s felt long and distinct, their 30s felt shorter, and their 40s and beyond feel increasingly compressed. In your 20s, you often experience many temporal landmarks: graduating college, first real jobs, multiple moves, relationship changes, identity exploration. By your 40s, if your life has stabilized, you might go years without a significant temporal landmark, and those years compress in memory. This suggests a strategy for slowing down perceived time. Deliberately create temporal landmarks. This doesn't mean you need to make dramatic life changes constantly, but it does mean finding ways to mark time, to create boundaries between periods. Starting a new hobby can create a landmark. Planning an unusual trip can create a landmark. Undertaking a significant project can create a landmark. The key is that the landmark needs to be meaningful enough to create a boundary in your mental timeline. It needs to represent a shift, a before and after. Small variations in routine aren't enough, but meaningful changes in how you spend your time, what you focus on, or how you engage with life can create the structure that prevents memory compression. Hash the social dimension of time. There's a social aspect to time perception that often goes unexamined. The people you spend time with influence how you experience time. Relationships that are novel and developing tend to expand time. This is why the beginning of a romantic relationship often feels long and rich. Every interaction is new information. You're learning about this person, discovering their thoughts and preferences, navigating uncertainty. Your brain is creating dense memories because everything is novel. Long-term relationships, if they become routine, can compress time. When you've been with someone for years, many interactions follow familiar patterns. Your brain can predict what they'll say, how they'll respond, what they'll do. These interactions compress in memory because they match existing schemas. But relationships don't have to compress time. Relationships that maintain novelty, that involve new shared experiences, that create ongoing discovery, continue to expand time. This is why relationship advice often includes suggestions like try new things together or go on dates even after years of marriage. These aren't just strategies for maintaining connection. They're strategies for preventing temporal compression. The same principle applies to friendships. Friendships that involve repetitive activities in repetitive settings tend to compress time. Friendships that involve variety and new experiences tend to expand it. There's also an emotional dimension. Relationships that involve deep emotional engagement create richer memories than relationships that stay on the surface. A 3-hour conversation where you discuss meaningful topics creates more memory markers than a 3-hour hangout where you engage in surface-level small talk and parallel activities. This suggests that the quality and depth of your social connections directly influences your perception of time. Investing in relationships that challenge you, surprise you, and engage you deeply will slow down your experience of time passing. The environment effect. Your physical environment plays a larger role in time perception than most people realize. Familiar environments compress time. Novel environments expand it. This is why people often report that the first few days in a new place feel long, but once you've settled in, time seems to speed up. Initially, everything is novel. You're noticing details, figuring out how things work, creating mental maps. But once the environment becomes familiar, your brain stops paying close attention. It creates templates and runs on autopilot. This has implications for how you structure your physical space. If you spend most of your time in the same few environments, and those environments remain unchanged, you're providing very little novelty for your brain to encode. Some people intuitively understand this and regularly rearrange their living spaces, redecorate, or make changes to their work environment. These changes force the brain to pay attention again, creating new memory markers and expanding the perception of time. But you don't need to constantly redecorate. Even small environmental changes can help. Taking a different route to work exposes you to new sights and breaks the routine. Working from different locations, even if it's just moving from your office to a coffee shop, creates environmental variety. Spending time in nature, especially new natural environments, provides rich sensory input that your brain eagerly encodes. The modern trend toward minimalism and consistent aesthetics, while visually appealing, might actually contribute to temporal compression. When every space looks similar, when your environment is carefully curated to be calm and unchanging, you're reducing the environmental novelty that helps create distinct memories. There's a balance here. You want enough environmental stability to feel grounded and comfortable, but you also want enough environmental variation to prevent your surroundings from becoming invisible to your attention. The challenge principle. Here's something counterintuitive. Difficult experiences often feel longer than easy ones, both in the moment and in retrospect. When you're facing a challenge, your brain is fully engaged. You're problem-solving, adapting, learning. This engagement creates memory density. A difficult project at work that takes 3 months might feel longer and more memorable than 3 months of routine work. A challenging hike might feel longer than an easy walk, even if they take the same amount of time. This is part of why childhood feels so long. Childhood is full of challenges. You're constantly encountering things you don't know how to do, problems you don't know how to solve, situations you don't know how to navigate. Every challenge demands attention and creates memories. As adults, we often optimize our lives to minimize challenge. We get good at our jobs, so work becomes easier. We figure out relationship patterns, so relationships become more predictable. We establish routines that eliminate daily challenges. This optimization creates efficiency, but it also creates temporal compression. This suggests a somewhat uncomfortable strategy for slowing down time. Seek out challenge. Not stress, but genuine challenge. Learn skills that are difficult. Take on projects that push your abilities. Put yourself in situations where you're not the expert. Travel to places where you don't speak the language. Try activities you're not naturally good at. Challenge forces your brain into a state of high attention and engagement. It prevents autopilot. It creates rich, detailed memories, and it slows down your perception of time. The digital time paradox. We need to talk about how technology is affecting time perception in unprecedented ways. Previous generations experienced temporal compression primarily through routine and aging, but they also had built-in sources of novelty and presence. Boredom forced them to engage with their immediate environment. Waiting forced them to observe, daydream, or interact with others. Limited entertainment options meant they couldn't easily fill every moment with stimulation. Modern technology has changed this fundamentally. We can now fill every gap in our day with infinite content. Waiting for a bus, scroll, commuting, podcast, eating alone, watch something, free evening, stream, lying in bed, social media. This creates a paradox. We have access to more novelty than ever before. Infinite content, infinite information, infinite entertainment. Yet many people report feeling like time moves faster than ever. Why? Because the novelty of digital content doesn't create the same memory markers as embodied experience. When you spend 3 hours watching YouTube videos, your body hasn't moved, your environment hasn't changed, and your memories of that time are often vague and undifferentiated. You might remember some of what you watched, but the experience compresses into, I was watching videos. Compare this to spending 3 hours exploring a new neighborhood. Your body moved through space. You saw new sights, smelled new smells, perhaps talked to new people. Your brain encodes spatial memories, visual memories, sensory memories, possibly social memories. That 3 hours creates rich, multi-dimensional memories that resist compression. Digital content also affects time perception through its addictive design. Platforms are optimized to keep you engaged, to prevent stopping points, to create the just one more effect. This keeps you in a state of partial attention where you're constantly consuming but rarely fully present. Hours can pass in this state without creating significant memories. There's also the issue of digital time distortion. When you're deep in a social media scroll or a gaming session, you can lose track of time entirely. You might think 20 minutes have passed when it's actually been 2 hours. This time distortion in the moment contributes to the sensation that time is moving faster than it should. The solution isn't to abandon technology, but it is to be more intentional about how you use it, to create tech-free spaces in your day, to prioritize embodied experiences over digital consumption, to use technology as a tool rather than a default state. The learning effect. Learning new things has a profound effect on time perception. When you're in a learning phase, whether it's a new skill, a new subject, or a new domain of knowledge, time feels expanded. This happens for several reasons. First, learning requires attention. You can't learn on autopilot. You have to be present, focused, engaged. This presence creates detailed memories. Second, learning involves progression. You can mark your progress, notice improvement, identify milestones. Each milestone becomes a temporal landmark, creating structure in your memory timeline. Third, learning often involves challenge and novelty combined, creating particularly rich memory encoding. Fourth, learning often connects to identity. When you're learning something new, you're not just acquiring information, you're becoming someone who knows that thing, who can do that thing. This identity evolution creates a sense of meaningful time passage. This is why students often report that school years felt long, even if they were busy and structured. Despite the routine of attending classes, there was constant learning, constant progression, constant change. Every semester was distinct because you learned distinct things, met distinct challenges, became a distinct version of yourself. As adults, many people stop learning in significant ways. They master their job and coast. They settle into hobbies they're already good at. They stick to topics they already understand. This cessation of learning contributes significantly to temporal compression. Want time to slow down? Become a beginner again. Learn a language. Learn an instrument. Learn a sport. Learn about a subject you know nothing about. The discomfort of being a beginner, the challenge of learning, the progression you experience will all work together to expand your perception of time. Hash the consciousness question. Let's go even deeper. There's a question underneath all of this. What is time, really? Is it something that exists independently that we experience? Or is it something our consciousness constructs? Modern physics tells us that time is stranger than our everyday experience suggests. Time is relative, affected by gravity and velocity. The past, present, and future might all exist simultaneously in a block universe, or time might emerge from more fundamental quantum processes. The physics of time remains one of the deepest unsolved questions. But regardless of what time is fundamentally, your experience of time is definitely a construction of your consciousness. You don't directly perceive time. You perceive change, and from change, you infer time. You construct a narrative of past, present, and future based on memory, present perception, and anticipation. This construction is influenced by countless factors. Your attention, your memories, your emotions, your physical state, your age, your culture, your expectations. Two people experiencing the same objective duration can perceive radically different subjective durations. This means that time perception is, to a significant degree, under your control. Not completely, but more than most people realize. By understanding the mechanisms that influence time perception, you can consciously adjust them. If you want time to feel slower, you can increase novelty, increase challenge, increase presence, increase the granularity of your experience. You can create temporal landmarks, vary your environment, deepen your relationships, learn new things. If you want time to feel rich and meaningful retrospectively, you can pursue engaging activities, create diverse experiences, invest in relationships, take on meaningful challenges. The key insight is that time perception is not something that happens to you. It's something your consciousness creates, and you can influence that creation. Hash the mortality awareness. We need to address the elephant in the room. The reason time perception matters so deeply is because time is finite. If you had infinite time, it wouldn't matter if years felt like months. But you don't have infinite time, and at some level you know this. This awareness of mortality, even when it's unconscious, colors everything about how you experience time. It's why the acceleration of time as you age feels distressing rather than neutral. It's why people talk about time slipping away or running out. It's why midlife crises often center around time panic. Different philosophical and spiritual traditions offer different approaches to this reality. Some emphasize acceptance. Time is finite, death is inevitable, and the point is to live fully within these constraints. Some emphasize transcendence. The goal is to move beyond temporal concerns to some eternal perspective. Some emphasize legacy. What you create or contribute outlasts your finite time. But regardless of your philosophical approach, the practical implications are similar. Because time is finite, how you experience it matters. The quality of your temporal experience is, in many ways, the quality of your life. This is why time perception isn't just an interesting psychological phenomenon. It's deeply existential. When time feels like it's rushing past, it can feel like life is rushing past. When years blur together into undifferentiated sameness, it can feel like you're not really living, just existing, just going through motions. The acceleration of time as you age can create a sense of urgency, even panic. Where did the time go? What have I done with it? How much is left? These questions emerge naturally as time seems to compress. But there's another way to approach mortality awareness. Instead of letting it create panic, you can let it create presence. The fact that time is finite makes each moment more precious, not less. The fact that you don't have forever makes now more important, not less important. This is the paradox. Awareness of mortality can either accelerate your experience of time or slow it down, depending on how you respond to it. If you respond with anxiety and distraction, trying to escape the awareness, time will feel like it's rushing past. If you respond with presence and intention, using the awareness to focus on what matters, time can feel spacious and meaningful. Hash the solution framework. So, what do you actually do with all this information? How do you translate understanding into action? The solution isn't simple, because time perception is influenced by multiple factors. But there's a framework you can use. First, increase novelty. This doesn't mean you need to constantly seek extreme experiences or make radical life changes. Small novelty counts. Take a different route. Try a new recipe. Listen to a different genre of music. Read about a topic you know nothing about. Talk to someone new. Small injections of novelty throughout your days and weeks will create more memory markers and slow down time. Second, increase presence. Practice paying attention to what you're actually doing, not what you're thinking about while doing it. When you eat, taste your food. When you walk, feel your body moving. When you talk to someone, listen fully. Presence increases the granularity of your experience and creates richer memories. Third, seek challenge. Take on projects that push you. Learn skills that are difficult. Put yourself in situations where you're not comfortable or competent. Challenge forces engagement and creates memory density. Fourth, create temporal landmarks. Mark time intentionally. This might mean planning a significant trip, starting a meaningful project, making a change to your routine, or any other event that creates a before and after in your life. Fifth, vary your environment. Change your surroundings regularly. This can be as simple as working from different locations or as significant as traveling. Environmental variation forces attention and prevents autopilot. Sixth, deepen relationships. Invest in connections that engage you emotionally and intellectually. Surface relationships compress time. Deep relationships expand it. Seventh, limit passive digital consumption. Be intentional about technology use. Create tech-free times and spaces. Prioritize embodied experiences over digital ones. Eighth, keep learning. Always be in the process of learning something. The progression and challenge of learning naturally expands time perception. Ninth, embrace boredom occasionally. Don't fill every gap with stimulation. Allow yourself to sit with nothing to do, to wait without distraction, to experience slowness. These moments of spaciousness provide contrast and prevent the sensation of time rushing past. 10th, reflect regularly. Create a practice of reviewing your experiences, processing your memories, noticing patterns. Reflection solidifies memories and prevents them from disappearing into the background. Hash the meta pattern. Here's the meta pattern underlying all of these strategies. You slow down time by increasing consciousness, by bringing more awareness to your experience, by moving through life with intention rather than autopilot. Autopilot is efficient. It allows you to function in a complex world without becoming overwhelmed. But autopilot is also where time disappears. When you're on autopilot, you're not fully experiencing life. You're going through motions, running scripts, following patterns. And your brain registers very little of this, because from the brain's perspective, nothing is happening that needs to be remembered. Moving off autopilot requires effort. It's more cognitively demanding to pay attention, to notice, to be present. It's easier to let routines run, to scroll mindlessly, to stay in familiar patterns. But easier comes at a cost. The cost is time, or more precisely, the cost is your experience of time. This is the ultimate choice you're making: efficiency and ease or presence and richness, smooth routine or textured experience, compressed time or expanded time. Most people don't realize they're making this choice. They optimize for efficiency without noticing that they're simultaneously compressing their experience of time. They wonder why years feel short without connecting it to the routines that consume their days. They feel like life is rushing past without recognizing that they've structured their life in ways that guarantee this sensation. But once you understand the mechanisms, you can make conscious choices. You can decide where you want efficiency and where you want experience. You can protect time-expanding activities even when they're less efficient. You can deliberately choose practices that slow down your perception of time. Hash the time investment paradox. Here's a final paradox to consider. Slowing down your perception of time requires investing time in ways that seem inefficient. Learning a new skill takes time. Seeking out novel experiences takes time. Being present rather than multitasking takes time. Creating temporal landmarks takes time. All the strategies for expanding time perception require you to spend time in ways that don't optimize for productivity or efficiency. This can feel counterintuitive, especially if you already feel like time is scarce. If years feel like they're rushing past, spending time on things that don't produce obvious outcomes might feel like a luxury you can't afford. But this is exactly backwards. When time feels scarce, that's when you most need to invest in expanding your perception of it, because the scarcity you're experiencing is perceptual, not objective. You're not actually losing time. You're losing the experience of time because of how you're using it. Investing time in presence, novelty, and consciousness doesn't waste time. It reclaims time. It transforms compressed, forgettable time into rich, memorable time. It turns time you would barely notice passing into time you fully experience. This is the time investment paradox. The more time you invest in expanding your perception of time, the more time you have. Not objectively, but experientially. And experience is what actually matters. Hash the ultimate insight. Time doesn't speed up. You just stop noticing it, but you can start noticing again. Every moment is exactly 1 moment long. Every day is exactly 24 hours. Every year is exactly 365 days. Nothing about objective time changes. What changes is your consciousness of time, your engagement with time, your memory of time. You have more control over your temporal experience than you realize. Not complete control, but significant influence. By understanding how your brain constructs the experience of time, you can work with these mechanisms rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. The acceleration of time as you age is not inevitable. It's predictable based on common life patterns, but those patterns can be changed. You can be 40 or 60 or 80 and still experience time as expansive and rich if you structure your life to support that experience. This requires intention. It requires effort. It requires choosing experience over efficiency, presence over productivity, novelty over routine. But these aren't sacrifices. They're investments in the quality of your finite time, which is ultimately an investment in the quality of your finite life. The question isn't whether time moves fast or slow. Time moves at the speed it moves. The question is, are you awake for it? Are you present for it? Are you creating a life that you actually experience or a life that passes by unnoticed? Because in the end, your life isn't measured in the years you exist. It's measured in the moments you actually live, the experiences you fully engage with, the memories you create. And all of that is within your control right now, starting with this moment. Start noticing again.